French accent in while speaking English, but now place to John. After 2 years and a half in Louvain, Belgium, John, vagabond of God, as he wrote them in a letter to his friend John Dove, once more found himself on the road. Destination, once more also, Holy Land. He crossed all France in July 52, walking or hitchhiking, and the temperature was high. And now, John speaking.
Hang on. Sorry, hold on 1 minute.
John speaking, nearly.
Sorry, hold on.
So how do I change iPad 2 to Gavin Young?
All right.
Okay, that is.
Shall I read the first part and then Kate's going to do some reading as well? So this is John speaking. I passed through France when all her corn stood stucked and booked in golden sheaves for harvest home. No Roman born. I was and am that as believes in Mass and Eucharist as mean of marrying the Queen of Queens.
One morning, as John was making his way through Provence, and also let him say what happened.
It was at breakfast time upon the way from far Louvain to fair Campania. I'd had but little supper yesterday, and money none I had, nor walked again by car. I thought I'm pretty hungry, Pater Noster, libera nos a malo. Fast there came a limousine, and keenly passed and tossed a whole loaf of bread from out of her window frame.
This event increased John's belief in providence, and he will return to it more than once, as he will also to memories of this summer of 52 harvest hours, playing the folia on his recorder on the road of Provence, serving mass in villages and town, cathedral, Pont d'Avignon, Notre-Dame de la Garde, good wine, the Mistral. Between Marseille and Toulon, he sent a letter to JBMS. If I can get an auto stop by aeroplane from Cannes, I'll be going by God's grace to Assisi, Rome, Brindisi, Bari. It didn't work. He spent a night in the Carmelite monastery at Monaco and then arrived in Italy. He decided to walk from the frontier to Assisi. I did it too in pilgrimages. Liguria and the crossing of the Apennines, and that didn't seem to have left an impression of him. But he fell in love with Tuscany and Umbria. That's what you see on the picture. Very understable, a kind of Galilea in Europe. Vineyards, endless fields of wheat, olives, orchards, wine, bread, oil, nature walked by human hands spoke to him of Christ as much as chapels, hermitage, and oratory. And on the eve of the Feast of St. Clair, the 10th of August 52, John arrived in Assisi and spent the night sleeping in a wood overlooking the town. At dawn, he entered Assisi on foot. I did the same, this picture. Convinced that St. Francis, his favorite saint, would have disapproved if he entered this town in a bus. The medieval city cast its spell on John, as on so many others. Having begged some bread from a local baker, he attended Mass, communion, visited several churches to pray, including those, of course, of Francis and Clare, played his recorder in the street to earn a few lire, and 3 days later, he continued on his journey towards Rome. His stay in Rome was very brief. He visited the Franciscan, here's this in the great show, where he knew already and spent 3 overnights in Rome. He retraced some of the stem from his 1950 pilgrimage that you must know, and left anxious to find a boat for his ultimate destination, Holy Land. He headed for Ostia, only to find that there were no connection boat from there to Israel. He would have to go to Napoli or to the Adriatic port of Bari, Brindisi. He then set off in a southerly direction, passing near Castel Gandolfo, decided to pay another visit to the Pope. Now we are in Castel Gandolfo. After spending the night near the pontifical residence and bringing himself to the attention of the Italian police, John found himself with a group of pilgrims in the inner courtyard of the residence. Let him speak.
Oh, we entered the yard, nor feared the guard, with a throng thrice hundreds three. 'Twas fulfilled my hope, for I saw the Pope, but I doubt if he saw me.
He had no luck in Napoli, and walked and hitchhiked his way through the peninsula to Bari. On arrival in the Apulia provincial capital, the Church of San Nicola, the biggest Franciscan convent in Europe, inspired him to write a poem. John speaking too.
In this great house of God, I'd gladly die and join the soul of Michelangelo, that surely now is with the saints on high, hearing the music of an organ flow in tides harmonious. There's times no more, but long eternity of lasting love, and old and new. Rise then, my spirit, soar in expectation of thine home above, prepared by Christ.
But he was no luckier in Bari. No ship was willing to give him free passage to Haifa. What then did God have in store for him? Should he continue to Brindisi or head back to Napoli? At the end of this August 52, John couldn't make up his mind. He felt worn out by the summer heat and by all the walking in the event. He decided to go back across the Apennines and arrived beginning of September in Baiano. It's a small industrial commercial town between Avellino and Napoli. Once there, he was arrested for vagrancy by the Carabinieri, either as a precautionary measure or to provide him with somewhere to spend the night. News travels fast in a small town. John's plight came to the attention of Santina Tullino. This wealthy family had an habit of giving shelter to passing vagrants. And Signora Tullino, a kind-hearted mother of 8, explained the situation to her husband. A pilgrim from the Holy Land is Christ among us, all the more so since he comes from the Holy Land, she thought. She headed straight for the prison when guarantor for John took him home. John went willingly, once more offering thanks to Providence. The Tullino house the left, mainly in Sudan, and their brother Antonio was the Tullino family. John remembers Sister Giuseppina played some tunes for her brother, teaching him the rudiment of recorder playing. John was soon asking himself whether God desired his immediate presence in the Holy Land. He settled in with the Tullino, but wished to contribute to paying his keep, was soon to be seen by the Tullino girls, broom in hand in the local school. Every morning he attended Mass, celebrated by Don Elia Ferrone, parish priest of Baiano, the young Englishman, indebtedly with the somewhere permanent to lay his head. Surely this pure young Englishman could help put out their cousin Francesco Picciocchi, the young priest of Mater Dei parish at Palma, Campania. And now it's Palma, Campania. Let me say a few words about this town, where John lived nearly a year. Off the beaten tourist track, it was then a country town of some 12 to 13 inhabitants, 16,500 today. Its rich soil is ideal for market gardening, cereal, all kinds of orchard fruit, pine trees flourishing on the flank of Mount Sant'Angelo. Archaeological sites, Roman ruins, churches signal its rich historical past. In the medieval ages, the Pope, Pascal II, was held prisoner here by the Emperor Henry V. He had refused the crown to him. In the 20th century, the town experienced rapid growth, lost 100 of its inhabitants in the fight for liberation. These dramatic events still remained and remain strong in local memory. Rural in its origins, the town retained many green spaces, market gardens, even in the center. Its narrow side streets are paved with large black tiles cut from basalt mined from Vesuvio. The town boasts a dozen of such churches and chapels, and feast day and colorful procession regularly punctuated the year. John quickly discovered Palma deserved its reputation as a Marian town. Half of its churches were devoted to the Madonna. During his stay there, the town was suffering from economic hardship. Campania at the time was second only to Calabria in poverty. Agricultural reform had done little to relieve the lot of the poor. Industry was non-existent. At 4 o'clock every morning, groups of men would begin to assemble at the crossroads at San Felice, Piazza di Martino, hoping for work. Social tensions were high. Unemployment meant that many people, young people, emigrated. So John arrived in this town. Don Ferrone and the Tullino made the necessary contact with Father Francesco, and John was invited to pay a call. He and the young parish priest, just a year older than himself, John was a year older than Father Francesco, hit it off immediately. Don Francesco was run off his feet by his various tasks of John and in need of a helper. And he offered John the job of sacristan to clean, look after the chapel, serve mass. Food was included, but unfortunately, he couldn't offer John a place to stay, and John has the money. John had a ready solution. He would stay into the church and make his cell in a cubby hole beside the entrance of the organ gallery, and also nearly all the night in the gallery itself where he played organ. The deal was done, and soon John was installed with his meager belongings and his sleeping bag like a traditional recluse, except that this recluse would not be so reclusive and often ventured forth into the outside world. Don Francesco Picciocchi deserves a little words about him. He had been in charge of the parish for 4.5 years at this time. He was from a well-to-do Baiano family, and also an intellectual. He has studied the work and made a doctorate on Pierre Abelard, the one known by Heloise, you know. His knowing and innocent expression, his simplicity, his distrust of airs and graces, including those of the ecclesiastical kind, make a deep impression of John, who was quick to confide in him. And John wrote, Father Francis, my confessor, spiritual guide, and prior all at once, is wonderfully good for me. Here he has a parish which is no easy task. Please God, I am of use to him. For his part, Don Francesco fell under John's spell, and the Englishman stayed in Palma will in time to come for him as one of the greatest graces of his life, as he told me. In his eyes, John's essential qualities was his innate goodness, simple lifestyle, poverty of spirit. He remembers how few clothes John possessed, and that he didn't wish no more, but was always fresh and neatly dressed. He was impressed also by John's self-discipline at table, by his insistence that it must do penance. Mater Dei, that's from the outside. It's quite new church. It was built only in 1904. Sanctuary was vast, could accommodate 500 worshippers with a central altar of white marble, overlooked by a great painting of the Virgin Mary in the style of the French Bouguereau. Another altar contained relic of Saint Desiderio, martyr, my patron. Desiderio is the Didier in French. Dressed as a young soldier martyr, Saint Desiderio has been in fact a martyr, yes, but a whole bishop, and he died more than 60 years old. Well, the sailing also depicted the Assumption in striking colors. It was here that John's new life began through his duties as sacristan, cleaner, keeper of the sanctuary, and they were hardly taxing. John speaking.
That broom was admirable too. I handled it with grace and swept the marble floors that knew who spat upon their face.
And now the inside of Mater Dei with the Bouguereau painting. One of the John tasks was to open the church doors at the appointed hours, a responsibility that John took very seriously. One morning, some local women came knocking, but John refused to open on the grounds that it was not yet time. The woman retired, soon came back with reinforcement from the rank of the Carabinieri, who knocked in their turn to no avail. Eventually, Don Francesco was obliged to intervene to restore calm. John soon learned that whereas religious fervor was a feature of life in Palma, religious practice came a poor second. Before the war, the parish has fewer than 5% regular communicants. The number has not increased. But He himself spent every day, John, I mean, kneeling in front of the tabernacle, motionless, deep in prayer adoration, which deeply impressed Don Francesco. He often climbed up the gallery night and day to play the organ or to use the bench as a writing table. He wrote to his father that he slept there and that it was nice if one did wake up in the night to play the organ alone in the church, where his principal listener were the bats. One day, a cat ventured into the church. He was quickly adopted by John, who baptized him Pompeii, of course. The cat became a regular visitor and faithful, I would say. On another occasion, a stray dog walked in and sat on the cool marble. John too adopted him, but this time Don Francesco didn't want him. He was one of the few quarrels between the both. The citizen of Palma soon got used to the sight of the eccentric but ever polite Inglese with his broken Italian. The Carabinieri kept a close eye on him, maybe even if he was not an American or Russian spy. What is he? Who was he? And he plays the recorder. He was free. Played the recorder in the street of, well, that's a picture a photo John sent to his friend Geza Vermes, and I found it from Geza. Just was free most of the time. He was quick to use his spare time to walk, to play the flute, and to head also for Mount Sant'Angelo, which dominated the town. He often strolled through the orchards, pine trees, but while September remained wild and dry, October and November were with heavy rainfall. On the 8th above Palma, John discovered the picturesque village of Castello, to which he would often return, and soon he ventured too beyond Castello towards the mountain along Via Tribucci, through the orchard of apples, apricot, various other fruits, and upwards through the forest. John speaking.
To no excessive height, the winding road went up and up from Palma to her crown. But when I'd got atop, first light had glowed on sleepy old Castello o'er that town. Waited a while, elated, did not frown, and by the doors were opened wide, did witness none, the one who is my bride.
Well, here is it. Climbing to Mount Sant'Angelo. This was how one day he arrived at the chapel of Santa Maria Miano, whose history, embellished by much local family and overlore, he would explore. And let us go with him to the chapel. And one more, I think, because at the end it's only a little path. Okay, that's a little path. In the 17th century, a man crossing, now that's a chapel, and why it is like this. This is in John's time. In the 17th century, a man crossing mountain was attacked by brigands and sought refuge about the chestnut and oak groves. As his poachers inexorably closed in, invoked the protection of the Madonna. Suddenly, a thick bush of wild roses, gorse, orchids sprouted in front of him, into which he plunged as he listened to the enraged cries of the Esmes rampaging through the forest in vain pursuit. In the dead silence that followed, broken only by the beating of his heart, the man promised the Virgin to build a chapel in her honor on the spot, which he started in the ensuing days with the help of the villagers from Castello. And the sanctuary was given the name Santa Maria Miano, and a painting of the Virgin and Child was placed there. The inhabitants of Castello and Palma came together on Easter Sunday afternoon, on Easter Monday morning, and on the Feast of St. John, tradition which had endured down through the century. As for the bells, it ringed out to help lost travelers to find their way. John often came to visit the chapel. Unfortunately, as you can see, the chapel was destroyed in the 1980 earthquake, and very badly destroyed. Let's see another look. Yeah, you see. So once again, let's return to John. Once again, John felt that he had arrived at the end of his journey, and he wrote of his wonder to John Dove. It has been a fantastic 2.5 months. Believe me, I've just blundered along in a most unpraiseworthy way. More and more, we learn to rely upon God entirely, to love only the life of grace with utter contempt of our own strength. As for me, I'm deeply convinced, and this half against my personal and poetic inclination, that for a time, maybe for a long time, maybe till the end, my role is here, nowhere else. And here, no less than if it were, I am here no less than if it were in Israel. He added the following lines with friend, not without humor. Pray on for my sanctification too, because it would encourage so many souls if such a wreckage might come to canonization. And I do so want to bypass purgatory. That's a very prophetic humor of John. Now that's a cupola of Materdi. His love, the love of hate of John began to take all of him once more. He often climbed up inside the cupola to pray, which occasionally astounded terrified visitors because the parapet was very extremely narrow and protected by a handrail. According to what told me Giuseppe Aloca, an historian from Palma, just under this cupola, those who knew John remember this, still marked by their original fear, his climbing escapade. His walk on the roof of the church caused no less panic on the ground. To get there, he climbed on all fours up the stairs of the bell tower, as onlookers wondered he would come tumbling down. He also climbed up the bell tower itself. He wrote to John Dove, all this I meditate over the Campanile for an hour every evening, saying the De Beata Vespers and the glorious mystery of the Rosary. All distraction, but by God's grace, much of the distraction is heavenwards in nature. Was it the conquest of Mount Everest by his fellow Briton Edmund Hillary on the 11th of January 1953, which inspired this madcap escapade? I don't know. One day, John climbed the cupola with a young boy, young Gaetano Fernandez, on his shoulders. You see, you imagine, under the horrifying gaze of his sister, Anna Maria. They both go back to terra firma, safe and sound. And so 50 years later, Anna Maria admits to having forgiven John was such a good and beautiful person. Being obliged, after all, to earn some money to buy stamps and for other modest expenses, John took a part-time work, what he could find, as dustbin man or bricklayer, which he always performed with exemplary care and attention. In time, the always elegant English gentleman with good manners became a very familiar sight to the inhabitants of Palma, emptying beans in the street of their town, regaling them with strange tales in broken Italian. On the 5th of May, he wrote to John Dove. That's the letter.
So I sweep and wash up and pray pretty distractedly, and when I have a just occasion, walk in the ways of Palma. Always I'm sure to be hailed and beckoned by sundry folk who like to have a laugh with, or at, doesn't matter which now, by God's grace, an odd English loony man. Sometimes when nothing to do here, I spend an afternoon as dustman or cement mixer with a pulley rope or some such. Dustman's my favourite, one of my oldest ambitions, and I tell them I'm the buffoon of Christ, the King of the Hebrews, and the herald of his strong united reign in from his own special people, the people of a strong spirit.
This strange Inglese who lived in the church intrigued many, among them Antonio Simonetti, Biagio and Salvatore Pristo, Silvestro Peluso, and they have never forgotten him. For the young Biagio, who succeeded him as a sacristan of Materdi, John was, as he wrote to me, special, a man of God, a man of prayer. He recalled him giving an helping hand to the street sweepers in Palma. His brother remembers being scolded by John when he came across him and his friend torturing baby lizard. Don't kill them, cried out the Inglese. Il buonissimo, another term for John, always kind, always smiling. For Antonio Simonetti, John was il cordialissimo. 15 years of age at this time, now a doctor, his task was to ring the church bells at mass time. Once, when he didn't turn up, John did it for him. only to be told off by Don Francesco for not doing it properly. The young Antonio still remembered John's humble acceptance of the reprimand. Only one thing made John angry: people spitting you say, in church. Silvestro Peluso sent me a written vivid memory of meeting John for the first time. I was angry because we were short of food at home. The streets were empty because of the heat, and that's how I bumped into him. We talked together. I hadn't a word of English at the time, but he had enough Italian to carry on conversation. I asked him, "Come ti chiami?" And he replied, "Mi chiamo Johnny." He also remembered John telling him that he lived in Mater Dei Church and that he had been to Mount Tribucci. And still Peluso speaking, he has seen a picture of the Madonna decided to become a Catholic, which is mistaken. John must have spoken to him about mystical marriage. We'll just come to. John continued to write home regularly, including in one letter a picture of the Virgin of Mater Dei. His mother sent him tea and other little treats that he shared with the children of the San Felice Street, and so much that arrival of parcel from home for the Inglese were eagerly anticipated. Don Francesco got the benefit of the tea, and over tea, John often told the priest how much he appreciated his sermons. Moreover, numerous locals also enjoyed Mrs. Bradburne's tea, an unfamiliar brew in Italy at the time, served by John whenever it arrived to the parishioner of Mater Dei after the Sunday Mass. At Christmas 52, a letter arrived from the Reverend Bradburne, which was found alongside the one John has received at Louvain in his tin hut after John's death.
It was a great joy for me to get your letter today and to know of your happiness and welfare, with your feet safely set upon the way in which old age I am coming to see more and more clearly is God's way for you, old dear boy. Thank you so very much. So in any of your thoughts of me or of yourself in relationship to me as your father, you must never think or feel that there is any need to explain, still less to apologize. Who am I in any case to criticize the ways of God for any of his children? God forbid that should ever be allowed to add to my many sins. 2 days ago, I came back from hospital. Pain in the hands of God can be a wonderful thing, I found. It is one of God's ways of unclasping the fingers that otherwise might cling too closely to the world. Of course, one does not like to talk too much about these experiences, but you will understand, and I think I can say it to you without offense, but unless one's religion is a hollow sham and faith an empty boast, at such a time, it is just a case of in manu tua domine and letting go. Even leaving mother standing in the road, absolutely alone. Well, that is all I have to say about my rotten self. What a lovely picture of Our Lady. It reminds me of a painting by the French artist Bouguereau. I like to think of you in your organ loft, but I do hope you get your proper and sufficient share of rest and sleep. For we are not out of Brother Ass the body yet. P.S. As a link between us henceforth, I will say the Creed, the Lord's Prayer, and the Hail Mary in the Holy Tongue.
John received a letter also from his friend Geza Vermes, announcing that the boat taking him from Israel back to France was due to dock at Napoli. So, typical John episode. On the 5th of January, on the grey rainy day, John stepped out of the church to catch the bus to Napoli, but he mixed up the stops and missed the bus. He later wrote a letter of apology to his friend, explaining what had happened and expressing his regret that he didn't get the chance to polish off a few bottles of wine together. Turn to Our Lady in Miano. His love for Virgin Mary continued to grow. On the 2nd of February, he went to pray at the chapel of Santa Maria Miano for the Feast of Candlemas and decided to consecrate himself to her. In the front of the altar in the chapel, in front of this painting, he proposed to the Virgin a mystical marriage, and feeling that she accepted the proposal, pledged a vow of fidelity to her and thus of human celibacy. What did happen? Sometime about 1920s, The picture in the chapel, along with his frame, was destroyed in a fire, and the local artist, Pietro Caliendo, was commissioned to paint a replacement. Il Professore used as model a woman and a young child, both still alive during John's time in Palma, and the three, and even the four of them, would have taken part in pilgrimage to the chapel. That's very moving to know. The painting cannot be called great art, but striking by simple realism. Unlike the painting in Mater Dei, it don't depict a young girl, but a 30 years old maternal figure, whose feature reflects the hard life that the original model has obviously experienced. The mouth is questioning rather than smiling. The face of the child, on the other hand, is smiling and full of grace. He's holding in his hand a burning heart consumed by flames. Is it his own or is it ours? The mother is holding her child with one hand while seeming to be discreetly pointing to him with the other, and the gaze of both holds you. The look of Jesus is confident, encouraging, while that of his mother is expressing a certain nobility and restraint. Also, I would say a little weariness. For Father Claudio Rossi, a wonderful Italian Jesuit who died in an accident, who knew John in Africa, his mystical marriage was a turning point in John's life. As with the marriage with Christ, this mystical marriage with the Virgin was in Middle Ages, and very commonplace devotion, especially with priests. We have a lot of painting with the Virgin Holy Virgin wearing a robe, brightly figuring all the wedding rings of his husband. And you know, if on earth polyandry is not very recommendable, Saint Joseph is not jealous in heaven. Several saints have illustrated this mystical marriage. John was in good company, and some great saints too. Recently, French Jesuit theologian has raised the topic and is rather skeptical, not about mystical marriage, but about it today, because there is a legacy of Freud. It considered very exceptional, very rare spiritual path to take. But maybe you know it, John says that he was unafraid, UNAFREUD. Back to town now. It was the beginning of an election year, and back to this earth in Italy. Political passion were running high. Let's hear John about it.
The monarchists were still as strong as they have ever been. Round Lareux town, a crowning song ran to the echoes keen. The socialists were booming and the communists did seethe, but all I did was grooming of the bride my roses wreathe.
The Communist Party campaigned on issue of poverty and employment, but the region remained in the thrall of Achille Lauro, today known only because a cruise ship got this name and was hijacked by Palestinians in 1985. Lauro, a monarchist and a populist businessman, was famous for his distribution of new shoes to electors. The left one before the election, the right one after, if you have correctly voted for him. The mafia also affected Palma, couldn't be ignored after the assassination of a nearby mayor, as the suspect was Pascalone Simonetti, a young from Palma. Slightly younger than John, impressive build. He has made his mark by repeatedly striking the famous Lucky Luciano, the king of mafia, on a race course. And he controlled fruit, vegetable, contraband cigarette in Palma, even up to Napoli. John must have seen or met him in the streets. On the 15th of March, Stalin died. All over Italy, including Palma, mourning processions were organized by the Communist Party. In the midst of the emotion, John wrote a poem, neither homage nor hatred.
This day died Stalin. Stalin now is dead. The clown made pause and thought a little while, only to find that it was yesterday. The clown could not forestall a fleeting smile. Then looking fairly serious, he said, "Dear Nuncles all, what difference does it make whether you died tomorrow or today or earlier? The king, for all men's sake, did die to do death all mortal fear." Did die to do to death all mortal fear. But what if one should die and then appear before Christ's throne with nothing more to show than that same scowl one sometimes wore below, whereon Joe Stalin tried to smile and said, I fear, although my smile was never dead. Requiescat in pace, amen.
Let's go on. The election campaign took off. Catholic Church played an active part. Fear of communists spurred by church persecution in Eastern Europe. Rumors spread of a communist plot to take over the Vatican in the event of victory, leading Cardinal Micara was a Vicar General of Rome to exhort Catholic, I quote, to vote well, to vote as Catholic, to vote as Roman. At Palma, John witnessed all the outbursts of verbal warfare between supporters of the three major parties, which occasionally found physically violent expression in the street. He made his own modest contribution. He had no choice, even if it was without enthusiasm. Like everybody else, the sacristan had to contribute to the poster campaign for the Christian Democrats. Holy Week began on the same day, as colorful as it was devotional, in which John played an active part in the lead-up to the procession up to Santa Maria Miano. Now we see the street where John lived, San Felice. The day after this feat, he decided to introduce his bride to the young friends who were just nearing him in the street. Issue had arising on Easter Tuesday. Opposite the church in Via San Felice lived a young beauty called Rosa or Bruna, according to some. There were several girls in the family, but Rosa, it was told to me in particular, attracted John's attention because she was always singing. One day, as John was chatting with the young friends on the step of the church, surrounded by Vespa, his casual remark that in his country, dark-eyed beauty like Rosa were especially admired, was greeted with universal glee and only stole teasing. Oh, the Inglese is in love with Rosa. After all, this handsome young foreigner was only 42, looked 10 years younger. He was a Catholic to boot. So even though he worked as a beanman, the regular parcel from abroad suggested that he came from good family. As the day went on, the teasing became more persistent. John revealed that Rosa was not in the picture since he was already married, and he offered to them, very stunned, to go to visit his bride. And so they set out together in the heat of May to visit the chapel of Santa Maria Miano, accompanied by Don Francesco to meet the Inglese bride. They prayed together before the painting of the Virgin and Child, and he told them simply, "She's the one," and explained the story of his marriage with the mystical bride of his heart. I asked Don Francesco about the young people's reaction. He didn't have any recollection, except that while they were coming down from the mountain, they hummed in unison familiar Italian love songs. On this very day, John and his friend visited Santa Maria. His father, Thomas, died at the age of 78 for a perforated gastric ulcer after lifting a heavy sack of grain while feeding his chickens. John received the news by telegram, but lack of money prevented him from attending the funeral. And now we are nearly to leave Palma, hot summer. As the temperature soared, not a drop of rain for nearly 3 months. At the beginning of July, procession or the honor of the Rosary. On 7th July, the spectre of communism receded. Palma, rest of the Campania, has voted 50% for Christian Democrats, only 18% for communists. Soon afterwards, John fell out with his parish priest. It seems that the priest had spoken somewhat slightingly of Gli Inglesi, perhaps with reference to the Union Jack that John has used to cover notebooks that Father Francesco showed me, containing poems and L'Inglese too often. Nearly 60 years later, John Francesco remembers only this one quarrel between them. In any case, John was preparing for returning to England. He vacated the organ gallery, which was destroyed in 1580, to rent a room for a few weeks. His brother Philip has written to tell him that their mother was alone and that he was the only one available to keep her company. Audrey and Philip were overseas. Michael was about to go to Canada, and Mary had a family to look after, children, not yet one children. John, deeply affected by the death of his father, was convinced and did the round of his Italian friends to say the goodbyes. Young Antonio Tullino was very emotional. John promised to send him a recorder from England, which arrived and became for the Tullino family a souvenir, nearly a relic of John, but disappeared in the 1980 earthquake. On the 4th of September, John wrote to his mother that he would leave for home as soon as the money arrived. And when he did, he immediately caught a flight back to England. a few lines, words of postscriptum. For a few years, John and Don Francesco Picciocchi exchanged greeting cards, after which contact was lost. In 1980, Palmaso was hit by the earthquake. Mater Dei Church was damaged, had to be closed for years. Santa Maria was destroyed. The Virginal Child since then is in the church at Castello, when you can see it. In 1996, Don Francesco Picciocchi went to Ottery, in Devon, looking for news of John in vain. That's very, very pitiful, unaware of his death. He discovered it only 6 years later. He had no doubt about John's sanctity. He told also Father Rossi. And for a time, he ran a prayer group to ask for intercession. I visited him in 2010, and we exchanged emails for several years after my visit. And he got really old, and he died last June. 7 months ago, and he was a little more than 80 years old. Thank you.
Thank you, Didier. If anybody would like to ask any questions, or if anybody would like to see the transcript of that talk, I've got that. I can email that to anybody. So please let me know. Thank you, Didier Rance, for that. That was wonderful. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you for all of them for listening too.
Please unmute yourself if you'd like to ask a question.
Yes, hello.
Hello, who's that?
It's Hayden.
Hello, Hayden.
Hello. Can I be heard? Can you hear
Yes,
me?
you can.
Yeah.
Yes. Can I just first of all thank Monsieur Rance for his wonderful insights into John's journeys across southern Italy. It's a great privilege to have you with us. Thank you very much. And to greet everyone here participating, I can't help wondering how many of you I may have sat near to or brushed the side of in Westminster Cathedral a year and a half ago for the marvelous service there and the meeting in the hall next to the cathedral, and the hopes that we may meet up in Manchester in September for this very special centenary. And a special greeting perhaps to Kate, with whom I was speaking an hour ago, slightly panicking over zooming into you all. So can I just thank you for your companionship this evening and wish you all the very best in the future. Hope to meet again.
Thank you, Hayden.
We all hope to be in Manchester.
Yes.
Which day is it? Is it the day?
Yes, so we are, so obviously this year, 2021 is John's centenary, it's his 100th birthday, and we are, COVID permitting, planning on doing an event at the Holy Name Church in Manchester to celebrate his centenary in September. Obviously it's depending on COVID and the vaccine, but hopefully by the end of September things will be a bit more positive.
Yeah, we all hoping for it.
Kate, may I ask a question?
Yes, of course.
Didier, thank you so much for that talk. Absolutely fascinating. So much interesting detail there. Just two little quickies crossed my mind. John would not have studied Italian, would he, before that trip to Italy? Did he, I mean, I'm assuming he got beyond sort of schoolboy Italian, as we got, if he was able to converse with people, that is way beyond asking for 2 beers, isn't it, or a white coffee. Did he pick Italian up as he went along?
Yeah, the question also is not too difficult. John was very keen in keeping language, you know, and in remembering even after years. in some of his poems, he starts in English, and you may find 5 or 6 different languages in the same poem. You know, it's incredible. So he had already been in Italy 2 years before, so I think he started keeping some Italian. And of course, as he was a year, I think he was speaking at the end fluently, with no problem.
Yeah.
But he didn't learn Italian, he learned French.
Oh, right. Well, perhaps the Latin would have helped him more.
Yeah, of course. And Latin
French.
and all this, so it wasn't very difficult. And you have a second question.
I've always got more than one. I'm very greedy. I'm very greedy. Given John's obsession with monasteries in every country he went to, is there any record in 1952, or indeed any other trip to Italy, of him visiting, say, Casamari or Monte Cassino? Or, I mean, does he visit any monasteries?
That's a good question. In fact, I had to cut off a lot of information about staying in Italy. I don't know if I still, I was a Camaldoli.
Camaldoli, yes.
Very near, and he wrote in Africa. After he wrote poems about his visits and about the Camaldoli.
They are wonderful.
He was very impressed by them.
Arezzo, they're Arezzo, yes, because of course, I mean, he obviously loved santuari like La Madonna, you know, that you showed us, but of course, Camaldoli, yes, wonderful. Les Camaldules en français.
Camaldule,
yes, an order which has never existed in England, sadly, but wonderful order, How much? So he did manage to fit in.
Yeah.
I thought he would. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Anthony.
Say something.
Go on, Terry.
Didier, thank you so much for this evening's talk. It's been wonderful. And what I'd like to say, you know, thank God that you wrote this book. You spent so many years doing the research of all of this. And I think also we need to thank Misty, John's mother, my grandmother, Kate's great-grandmother, whoever she is, Kate, because Misty was an incredible person in that she kept so many of his letters. And without those, without Misty saving all those, you know, that they've been, you know, you've got a lot of information through Mist, who probably handed them down to Kate's grandmother, Mary, who handed them to Celia, who kept everything, and through the JBMS. And thanks to Didier for documenting it all in here, because there was so much in here that I didn't know about John. You know, he was my uncle, but I was born only in 1957. So to have the history of his life and going through Italy and France and everything, it's wonderful. So thank you, Didier.
Thank you, Tara. I think that John's relation with his mother, starting with the letter, could be another evening, if Kate agree.
Yes.
Because there is a lot of, and you know, he wrote in poetry to her.
Yes, absolutely.
Mainly, yes, it's a very beautiful relation, and sometimes I wouldn't say it's as if I was the mother on one side and the mother of the adult John on the other side, but sometimes the image you have of her is not exactly the same. So it's very interesting to see how the religion changed from the little boy to the hermit and so on in Africa, and to the man living with the lepers. That would be a good idea. Thank you, Teresa.
Yeah, not at all.
I'm taking note of it. Okay. Kate, no sound, Kate.
Thank you, sorry.
Oh, okay.
Thank you everybody for joining the Zoom call, and thank you, Didier, that was a wonderful talk. And as I said, if anybody would like the transcript of Didier's talk, I have that in email form.
Thanks, Kate.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.